Hi, my friend. Today we're talking about how your intuitive eater gets buried, how we lose sight of our abilities to connect to our bodies, how we lose the ability to listen to our hunger and fullness cues, how we develop a unhealthy relationship with food. We are going to kind of look back on how that happens. There was a couple of days ago where I was taking some notes and kind of doing some brainstorming on some content for you guys. And one thing that I recognize would be really valuable is to look at the different ways that we can get infected by diet culture, basically, and how at different stages in our lives, because that's really something I've noticed amongst my clients. And after having talked to thousands of women and chronic dieters, really recognizing the different stages in your life in which you start developing this belief that there's something wrong with you and that you need to control your eating and restrict your eating. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And I'm really excited about it. Right now, I'm kind of laying back on my office chair. I've been on a roll. I've recorded 3 podcasts this afternoon. I'm just so inspired right now, and I have so much to say and I have so much to share. And so let's get into how your intuitive eater may have gone buried. And this is a conversation that's important to have because when I'm talking about intuitive eating to someone who has been chronic dieting for so long, they might think that this is not possible for them, and it's not, or maybe it's not possible for them anymore. But then I'll ask them, like, all right, let's reflect on your past. When you have the earliest memories of you eating, how did eating feel for you? And there's a lot of them that I would say, I was an intuitive eater, right? Like I ate when I was hungry. I ate whatever was offered to me and I was able to leave food on the plate and I didn't think about food that much. Like a lot of people can answer that. And so that shows me that, okay, at one point in your life, you were an intuitive eater because we're all born as intuitive eaters. And so what that tells me is that you learned these new beliefs. You learned these new behaviors around food that were maladaptive, that were restrictive, that were stuck in the diet mindset. And if you learn those, then you can unlearn those things because that's the beauty of brain plasticity. We are able to learn and unlearn and change the way that we think and change our neural pathways. So we've got the one bucket that does remember being an intuitive eater and having a healthy relationship with food and growing up in an environment where the talks around food were not disordered. They were positive and they were balanced and they were healthy. However, there's another subset, which is the people, the women who don't ever remember having a positive relationship with food. And that's where we're going to start. And then we're going to talk about the ones who do remember having a positive relationship with food and being an intuitive eater. So there is those people who grew up in a diet culture family. Maybe your mom was constantly dieting, that's all you knew. Maybe you were always given low calorie foods. Maybe you were on your mom's Weight Watchers plan with her. And maybe you also grew up in a family that taught you beliefs around food that weren't necessarily the most positive or the most empowering. Things like having to clean your plate no matter what, even if you were full, right? Like part of the clean the plate club. So you were taught at a very early age to bypass your fullness levels and to eat to a point of discomfort, and your body just got accustomed to that. Or maybe you had very irregular meal times. You didn't know how long you were going to go before you eat again. Maybe food was scarce in terms of financial reasons. Maybe there was food insecurity. Maybe your parents were really busy, so food was not always made for you. So whatever the reason was, at an early age, you were never shown healthy eating habits. There was no cooking in the house, or if it was like very low calorie diet foods. And so that is the bucket of people who grew up either in diet culture or in a family that themselves maybe struggled with their food habits and had a really hard time passing on healthy habits to their children unintentionally, right? Like all parents, most parents have good intentions, but sometimes when we're struggling with our relationship with food, it's really hard to teach that to your children. And a lot of the times, like especially with the mothers that I work with, they don't want to pass down their habits to their daughters. It's not intentional. It's not something that they want their daughters to struggle with, but because they know no other way, they don't know how to talk about food, they don't know how to behave around food, then it can be really hard. And that's why I have a full training in my academy, how to raise intuitive eaters, because we're never told the kind of language that would be helpful and positive and empowering for our daughters and our sons. And sometimes we actually do need to do the work to learn how to communicate that to our children, communicate that to our spouses or people that we want to share this information with. And if that's you, then please don't see this as a sign that because you can't remember ever being an intuitive eater, you're not capable of it. Because when you were very, very young, maybe a very young baby, at that point, you don't have memories of it, but you were an intuitive eater. You cried when you were hungry, and hopefully your mother fed you when you were hungry, and you stopped when you were full. You did not overconsume on milk because your body knew how to speak to you. At some point, even if your memory does not remember it, you were an intuitive eater. And just like we were talking about neuroplasticity, you are capable of learning that again. You are capable of learning to listen to your body and understand the language of your body and the way it communicates with you. Because if you're able to do that by knowing when you need to pee or when you need to sleep or how to operate through other functions in your body, then you can do that with food. And then there's the bucket who maybe grew up with a healthy relationship with food, but along the way, you began thinking that there was something wrong with your body. Maybe this was in high school where people were mean, they made fun of you. Maybe you naturally do just have a bigger frame, a bigger body. You aren't the stick thin ideal. And this isn't because there's something wrong with you. It's really just because this is your body type and this is your set point weight. But at an early age, you were teased or you were told by a doctor that you needed to lose weight. And so you were either put on a diet or you did it yourself and you started restricting. And that is where that intuitive eating ability started to fade because the restriction led to consistently not listening to your body, paying attention to food rules, paying attention to external sources instead of listening to your internal voice. And over time, with every new diet, it gets buried deeper and deeper away. Again, if that's you, if this started at an early age, then do not blame yourself. Do not beat yourself up. We live in a society that is extremely shaming towards especially women's bodies. And we've all been convinced into thinking there's something wrong with our bodies. Either our thighs are too big or we have too much cellulite or our boobs are too big or too small. And there is always a new flaw that is created for the women body. And we are taught this idea that if we look a certain way, then we'll be happy and then we'll be confident and then our lives are going to be so much better. And we're taught that if the outside of us changes, then the internal side of us is going to change. And that's obviously not the case. But if you are someone who remembers being an intuitive eater, and then at some point in your life, you were given subconscious messaging that there's something wrong with your body, you started restricting, and that got buried, then we can find it again. Absolutely no doubt. Everyone has that ability to come back to that natural ability. And then there's going to be the third bucket where it's going to happen a little bit later on in life. Maybe it was during a transition when you were in university or from high school to college, or when you had kids, when you went through a divorce, when there was a big change in your life. That's usually when it happens. Maybe you had a death or a loss and there was big emotions involved. That's usually when something happens to our bodies and we tend to change. For me, it was university when I started to gain weight and grow into my adult body, and that was super uncomfortable for me and I didn't know how to handle that. And a lot of women, it's after pregnancy, after having their children, thinking they have to bounce back to their pre-baby body. So the answer is obviously restricting and dieting and under eating and over exercising. Maybe it was during a depression or a really hard time in your life when you turned to food and you gained weight over time because food became your coping mechanism. And after having gained that weight, you decided that you were going to lose it. You were going to get your life, quote unquote, life back together. You were going to start working on yourself. You were going to get back on track. And you started dieting. And that was the moment that you stopped listening to your body. Maybe you started under eating or restricting or giving up certain foods. And that intuitive eating ability started fading. It's really not uncommon for dieting to be a solution in a period of transition, in a period of change and a feeling of instability. I know when I was in university and I felt like my life had less control than I was used to, a lot of the times we cling on to what we think we have control over, which is food and our bodies. And we think that if we can control that, then other areas of our lives are going to feel more in control, or we're going to have this false sense of control, because that's really what it is. Dieting is this false sense of control, but all we're really doing is we're focusing on something that we can't control. We've been fed this belief that we have this full control over our bodies, and we really don't. And I remember when I first started dieting, there was this incredible sense of control that I felt, because as I started eating less and less and less and exercising more and more and more, I was losing weight. And I thought that, oh my God, I have control over something. I can shape my body to my will. And of course, that was not the case. I was just undernourishing my body, and that's really what was happening. And I know, of course, I know now that I could work out harder and I can lift heavier and I can eat more and I will build muscle, but I don't see my body as a lifelong project. I see wanting to build muscle because I want to get strong. And if I'm trying to eat more and I'm trying to eat more protein, it's because I'm trying to get strong and I'm trying to build muscle, not because of the way that it looks or trying to shape and control my body. So as we went through those three bigger buckets, I'll recap, but this is a good time to kind of take note of where you land and where you feel like you fit. So, and you might not fit into any of these buckets, but that's usually one of the three that I see. So there's number one, when you grew up in a family, either your mom was constantly dieting, your dad was always dieting, your entire family had some kind of unhealthy relationship with food. You were taught to always finish everything that was on your plate, right? You were part of the clean the plate club, and you were taught that certain foods were good or bad, or maybe you never were really taught any kind of healthy habits. Maybe your family did a lot of frozen dinners. There wasn't much cooking at home. There wasn't structure, and you didn't really know what was a positive relationship with food. That is the first bucket. And if that's you, maybe you don't have a strong recollection of what it feels like to be an intuitive eater. So even just the thought of being able to listen to your body and having food feel easy and natural and intuitive can seem impossible for you. And I understand why you feel that way. But please, if you're in that bucket, remember that it's not because you weren't born as an intuitive eater. It's just that very early on in your life, something interfered with that ability. Now, in that second bucket, you're going to find the ones who it started midway through life, maybe in teenage years, which was the case for me, where maybe you got messages that there was something wrong with your body. You saw people around you dieting, or maybe you just wanted to try. Maybe you wanted to go on Weight Watchers with your mom. And that ability to listen to your body started to fade as you hopped into diet culture and started ignoring your body cues and forming food rules. And then in that third bucket, we're going to find when it happens a little bit later on in life. So maybe you feel like in your teens, in your 20s, you really were an intuitive eater. You don't remember having the same issues with food and with your body, but maybe after having kids or going through a big transition in your life, going through a divorce, going through menopause, at some point in your life, you started being dissatisfied with your body. And that is what triggered the food restrictions and the dieting. And then those behaviors that maybe you didn't have in the past, like overeating, binging, emotional eating, started getting more and more extreme, more and more frequent as you dieted. And so as those behaviors started showing up in your life, you started doubling down on dieting, hoping to gain control of it. And then with every new diet that you did, it started feeling more and more out of control. And it's kind of like that Chinese finger trap. If you don't know what I'm talking about, it's like this cylinder that you put around your fingers. And most people's natural reaction trying to get their fingers free is to pull their fingers apart, like away from each other. And that Chinese finger trap, what it does, it is actually pulls you in closer. Like it squeezes you and traps your fingers the more you try to pull them apart. And so the counterintuitive way to actually get your fingers free is to push them together inside that cylinder, which releases some of that pressure. And then you can finally get your fingers to be free. And so I really think of diet culture and just dieting in general as that kind of paradoxical trap, because we think that when we get stuck in that, when we get stuck in overeating and unhealthy habits and inconsistency, the solution is just to double down on dieting and to double down on food rules and restrictions. And the more we try to control our food, obviously we think that we're going to feel more in control because that's what societal messages are telling us. That's where everyone online is telling you kind of the same way that everyone tells you that you need to have a budget in order to be financially responsible, which I think some budgets work for some people, but personally, like I do not work with a budget. If someone gives me a budget on how much I can spend, I'm just going to feel like that external pressure and I'm going to want to rebel and I'm going to want to spend even more because I feel like even though the budget might be self-imposed, I still feel like it's not necessarily intuitive and it's not coming from me. It's coming from like this external rule about how much I'm allowed to spend. And really the same goes with dieting. The more we think that food rules and restrictions are going to keep us quote unquote in control, the more out of control we feel. And that's because when we started developing those habits around food that maybe were maladaptive, maybe were disordered, they were a side effect of the dieting. They were a consequence of it. And so how can something that caused the problem be the solution? And that is why people feel like the more we diet, the harder it gets and the worse it gets over time, right? We gain more weight over time. There is so much research that shows that over 2/3 of dieters gain back more weight than they originally lost on their diet. And there's a reason for that. Not just because your body adapts to the diets, right? It adapts to the restrictions. It slows down your metabolism in order to take in as many calories as possible and make the most of it. And so if you're someone who feels like you're on your 10th diet and you feel like you look at a cheesecake and you gain weight, or you feel like you have to eat less and less and less in order to maintain your current weight, that's not just a perception. That's because with every new diet, your body gets smarter at utilizing the food that you give it, and it slows down because it doesn't know when the next restriction, when the next starvation is going to be around the corner. And so might as well conserve as much energy and conserve as much storage in the form of fat to prepare for that. And then along with, that's just kind of the weight gain piece of it, but along with each new diet, you accumulate more rules, right? Like you do keto and that diet teaches you that carbs are bad and you shouldn't eat them. And so you create a rule around that. And then you do Weight Watchers that tells you to look at food in terms of points as if eating was a freaking video game. And then you start seeing foods as points instead of just a food, something to nourish your body. You see things as being 0 points and higher points, and some things are good because they're 0 points and other things are bad. And so then you do intermittent fasting, and that diet tells you that you should only eat between, let's say, noon and 8 p.m. So anything before that and after that is breaking the rule. And so with every new diet that you do, you accumulate these rules. And so of course, eating starts to feel more stressful and more overwhelming and more confusing because you feel like you can't eat anything. And no matter what decision you make, you're going to make the wrong one. And so now eating is no longer this easy, peaceful, natural, intuitive experience. It is so filled with guilt and shame and negative emotions because you feel like you're doing something wrong and you can never live up to the expectations and the perfectionism that our society makes us believe we need to hold ourselves to. So I'm going to finish this episode by speaking to you directly, the person who's listening to this. Whether you are someone who lost your intuitive eating abilities early on just because you were never shown and taught what a healthy and balanced relationship with food is and what healthy, balanced, sustainable habits look like, whether you're that person who started dieting and restricting food in high school, in your early 20s, in your 20s after having kids, during menopause, after going through a divorce, after going through a loss, and after noticing that your body changed and feeling dissatisfied by that and thinking that diet was the answer, first of all, please have compassion with yourself because you didn't know any better. Diet culture is everywhere and no one ever questions it. It is the norm, right? Like people will say disordered things about food all the time. And when you start going on your intuitive eating journey, you will notice it. And you will notice people around you who you thought were like the image of health and perfection and just having all of their shit together when it comes to food actually have a very unhealthy relationship with food. Even the people who you follow on Instagram who are showing these gym pics and healthy recipes, like people will put all kinds of stuff on Instagram without actually showing you the behind the scenes. Whatever before and after pictures that you see, it does not give you the entire picture. Number one, it gives you the before and after. It doesn't give you the before after, right? Like when the weight comes back and the self-esteem that shoots down to the ground, we don't see any of that. But I understand why you are shown the before and after. You are given these false promises of this life where you're going to feel happy and you're going to feel confident and all of your issues are going to go away once you lose weight through whatever diet they're trying to sell to you. Because of course, they want to make money, right? They thrive off of repeat customers. They make profit after profit when you keep coming back for more. And so why would we give them something that works? Why would we give them something that is going to help them for the rest of their lives if that means that they're going to take it and then they're going to never come back? We want to recreate these problems. We want to create flaws in women that they didn't even know that they had. We have created so many flaws in women just to keep us distracted, just to keep us small, just to spend so much time and energy trying to fix something about us that was never meant to be fixed in the first place. Take cellulite, for example. At what point did you start believing that because you had cellulite on your body, there was something wrong with you? Or looking at stretch marks and looking at it as something that we need to get rid of or hide or buy some cream to pretend it's not there, to pretend that you are not a human being whose body is in constant growth and transition. Why is it that we can accept that kids will keep growing, they will keep changing, that a 5-year-old is not going to fit into the same clothes that they had when they were 2, and that when I'm 18, I'm not going to fit into the same clothes that I had when I was 12. we at some point in our lives accept that the human body is meant to change. And then I want you to get curious on what age in your mind did you start thinking that this was the body that I was going to stay at? Whether that was like 18, 25, 30, 35, at what point did it start being not okay for your body to keep changing? And people are going to have all kind of answers to this, but I recommend that you just ask yourself that question. And a lot of the times, like, we start accepting that bodies change again, like in your 60s and 70s when you start being elderly and your boobs start to sag. And like, although we still are very ageist and we will make comments about someone aging, we still accept that our bodies are going to look different later on in life. But when it comes to that middle period where you're still going through transition, you're getting married, you're having kids, you're having new jobs, you're making career changes, you're moving countries, like there's so much going on in your life. And we're just expected, our bodies are just expected to stay static, to not be fluid, and to not change throughout different life transitions. So deciding to pursue intuitive eating, if you don't feel like you're an intuitive eater, if you feel like diet culture has really infiltrated on your belief system about food and about your body, then you know that it's not just about listening to your hunger and fullness cues and listening to your body and breaking food rules. It's about so much more than that. It's about changing your entire paradigm around food, around body image, around our society, about norms that are perpetuated, about people pleasing, about not having boundaries, about not taking care of ourselves and always giving to others. It's a whole shift in the way that you're living. And that's why, like, I can never fully communicate to anyone when I'm talking about what I do and like my clients that I love so much, how much your life changes when you really make the commitment to break free from diet culture and to pursue intuitive eating. It's not just about food. It's not just about changing your relationship with food. It really is about living a new, free life based on your terms. And I know that it's easier said than done. No one really gives you a roadmap on how to do this, how to break free from diet culture, how to actually change your paradigm and change your beliefs and change your behaviors when it comes to food and body, and really just rewiring the way that you're used to speaking to yourself. I have worked with so many clients at this point, and I know that it's something that's complex. So that's exactly why I created my Food Freedom Academy, my group coaching program, because if I had the choice to go back in time and really invest in something that is going to give me guidance and make me feel less alone and give me community and really give me the step-by-step action steps on how to do this and how to fast track my healing journey so that I can start really living my life and experiencing it and being present with it, I would have done anything to have that. And that's exactly why I put so much effort and love and energy into creating this program that I'm so proud of. And I'm so thankful for the amazing women I've gone to work with and I've gotten to help and to meet. It's just been a really incredible journey, and I am so excited to open the doors to my academy in just a couple of days. So September 14th is when I officially open the doors to apply, and we're going to be open for applications for a very short period of time before we get started with our new cohort. Spots are limited, so if you want to be one of the first ones to get notified when we open the doors to apply, then you can go to the show notes at sabrinamayan.com/academy, and it's going to give you that opportunity to hop on the wait list. All right, I hope that this was a very valuable episode. Send it to someone that you know and love if you think that they could benefit from it. Have an amazing rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you found it valuable, I would love if you would share it with someone you know that could benefit. If you're loving the show, don't forget to subscribe over on Apple Podcasts so you don't miss a single episode. I really love hearing feedback from you, so please leave a rating and review over on Apple to help us get in the ears of more people who need it the most. Finally, come hang out with me on Instagram at Sabrina Magnan Health for more educational content and get up close and personal with me. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you on the next episode.